Hey, welcome everyone to this Conversations in Careers interview. I'm delighted to be joined today by Simon Portman, who works for Marks and Clerk. And we're going to be discussing his career journey, how he got to where he is today, and all sorts of amazing advice that I'm sure he's got to give to young career seekers. So I'm going to hand you over to Simon. And Simon, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you currently do?
Hi, yes, I'm Simon Portman. I work at Marks and Clerk in Cambridge. I've been in Cambridge since the late 90s when the biotech boom took off, and I advise life science clients, be it universities, charities, small startups, big multinationals, on the commercial contracts for the development and exploitation of the technology and related regulatory issues like clinical trials, data protection, as well as due diligence on corporate transactions.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. So I want to go all the way back to when you were at school. And can you just tell me what did you study when you were at university?
I studied classics at university, uh, so not remotely relevant to what I do now.
Mhm.
Uh, it's useful though, in that firstly I can quote Latin and Greek at people and sound clever, and they don't know what I'm talking about. Also, when you've learned about the downfall of the Roman Empire and the assassination of Caesar and things like that, it's really good training for office politics in a law firm.
Amazing. So after university, what did you do next?
I worked for a while in the library bookselling division at Blackwell's in Oxford, and what they used to do was handle big sales of books online for big customers like libraries, universities, schools, and so forth. So it was the early model of the computerized book ordering regime that then Amazon took further. So it was interesting to be involved in it. But back then, as you can imagine, the whole computerized thing could be a bit glitchy when you're matching up uh, customer orders with what you get from the publisher and what they think they've sent you and so forth. So uh, after a while, I realized that all I was doing was trying to sort out all the problems. So I thought I'd go for a change in career.
Interesting. And is that then when you made the decision to move into life sciences?
Well, yeah, I converted to law. I trained in London and I had a stint in-house in the petrochemical industry.
Mhm.
However, the firm I trained at, I joined because they were intellectual property team. When I got there, they'd all gone. So there wasn't really anything I wanted to do when I qualified, which is when I got hired by one of the firms in Cambridge and ended up doing work for their life science team. And that, as I said, was in the late 90s when not only was Cambridge becoming Europe's leading technology cluster, but it was the big biotech boom as well.
Amazing. So that decision that you'd made to kind of transition into a completely different career path, what was that like at the time?
It was interesting. I mean, it probably the biggest learning curve I had was firstly because I hadn't done science since school. Was getting a grip on all the scientific issues in a range of technologies. Uh,
Mm.
though clients were used to explaining that because they have to explain it to shareholders and so forth. So I needed a less detailed technical knowledge than say a patent attorney. The other thing was actually that law school does teach you a lot of law on the theoretical side, but when you start doing commercial law, when it's work, advising on product development and commercialization and that, a lot of what you're doing is advising on practical issues like, is there a market for this? What could go wrong? If it does go wrong, whose fault will it be? And they're much more practical considerations that you really have to learn on the job.
Mhm. Amazing. So when you joined industry, which role did you start as?
Uh, when I was in industry, you mean in-house?
Yeah.
Uh, I was that then I was in-house in the in-house legal team. So it was basically doing commercial contracts, largely in the oil and gas sector. And so it in terms of the day-to-day job, it wasn't any different from being in private practice, except you didn't have to do any time recording. But on the downside, the clients were just down the corridor, so you couldn't hide.
Mhm. So would you say that your career from kind of like then to now has followed quite a linear path, or have you had any changes?
Probably linear in terms of experience. I mean, I've changed firms and that. Also, I've probably become uh, much wider in the areas of technology that I advise in,
Mm,
partly because it's the things that I got involved in, but also because they are becoming, a lot of things are becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. So, as you know, I head up the extended reality team at my firm. And we've given a couple of talks for one nucleus on that because, extended reality is being used for things like product design, training of medical staff,
mhm.
uh, uh, drug discovery, therapy, diagnosis, and so forth. So you're essentially getting, computer games technology grafted onto the healthcare sector. And then when you throw in, say, for remote surgery, that you've got robotics, AI, 5G, and so forth included as well, often a huge number of disciplines come into play.
Amazing. What kind of key challenges had you faced along the way to where you are now?
Um, Probably sometimes, meeting tight deadlines, sometimes meeting, clients' expectations in terms of, how successful their technology is going to be, because particularly people with a research background tend to think that if something is scientifically interesting, that it's going to be useful or there is going to be a market for it. And often there isn't. And then also, when you're negotiating contracts, trying to match up the different agendas uh, and priorities of, say, academia versus industry or small company versus big multinational and so forth.
Brilliant. And are there any kind of key people that you've met throughout your career that have had a real impact on where you are?
Not, to be honest, not no one massively stands out, and there have been a lot of them in terms of, how how they've trained me or
Mm,
how they have managed their companies or developed their technology and that. And also very occasionally you've had the lesson of someone who's shown you how not to do things, or the company that hasn't succeeded. And sometimes it might be bad luck, sometimes it might be their fault, sometimes it might just be the fault of an entity they're related to that they couldn't control. Equally, I hope that I've inspired other people, but probably also I've made mistakes that they've learned from as well.
Brilliant. So, is there anything that you might have done differently in your career?
Probably not. And to be honest, with all apologies to anyone who did a law degree and then went into law, I'm quite glad I didn't, because I it's not what I wanted to do at degree level.
Mm,
So so what I would say to people probably is, and I know that there is a temptation now for people to get directed to a degree, sorry, to a career in their
mm,
education earlier and earlier, like even a GCSE level. And I would actually say to people, don't try and second guess what you want to do, what you might end up doing as a job, because when you get there, it might not be anything like you expect it to be, and you might not like it. So I think you're far better educationally doing what you're good at and what you want to do, uh, and then seeing where that takes you.
amazing. So, do you feel like you almost discovered like a new passion along the way that you'd never expected?
I Yeah, I mean, probably when I was at university anyway, people were more open-minded about what they were going to go into. I mean, obviously, if you're studying medicine, you're probably going to be a doctor. But and then there were other people that knew, that if you're studying law, you're probably going to be a lawyer. And there were other people that knew that they would go, that they might go into certain things, or say they had a they knew they were going to, say, go to the army or something like that. But no, if someone told me this is what I was going to end up doing, I wouldn't have been massively surprised. It was one of the things I thought I might do, but I had a reasonably open mind. Yeah.
Amazing. So you've shared some really, really interesting stories and insights to your career, but I'm wondering if you could go back and tell younger Simon one piece of advice, what would you say?
Uh, it would probably be, when you're at school and university, you have very long holidays and very short terms. And when you start working, you have that big culture shock of shorter holidays. Uh, and you wonder if you made a terrible mistake. And probably a longer working day than when you were at school as well. I would say you soon get used to that. If you enjoy what you're doing,
Yeah.
it won't be a problem anyway. And of course, unlike school and university, you do actually get paid.
Great advice. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Simon. It's been really
Thank you.
interesting to have this conversation, and I'm
Likewise.
sure those watching will have found it just as enjoyable as I did.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to touch base with me, then my contact details are available via you, or I'm on LinkedIn. So,
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again.
okay, likewise.